To have Christina Lacluse from the University Counseling Center. She's one of our favorite presenters. I think we have her every semester. So, but that's by popular demand.
Thank you so much, Paul. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, as Paul mentioned, my name is Christina. I'm the Associate Director of Outreach and Programming at our University Counseling Center. And it's a real pleasure to be back with you here today. I really, as Paul mentioned, I do come usually once a semester and always really enjoy working with transfer students. So good to be with you today. And I just want, before I introduce the true facilitator for today's workshop, just want to invite everybody to make this a dialogue and a conversation. So we have some fantastic information that we'll present to you, but really want to invite you all to be willing to have a conversation about this. It's certainly so much more interesting, I think, for presenters when we can have a dialogue with our audience, but I'm also a big believer in the collective wisdom of the group. And so you all bring your own experiences and your own insights into this topic. So as we move through today's workshop, just want to encourage questions, comments, sharing of experiences. And with that, I will pass it over to my wonderful co-facilitator, Arianna.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today and for letting us guide you through your relationship wellness journey. And how this came about was we did a workshop last semester on kind of recognizing toxic behavior and the red flags and what that looks like. And I wanted to do a follow-up workshop that was just a little bit more in depth of the science behind how we get into toxic relationships, why it happens, and how we can help ourselves avoid or prevent getting into one. Because I feel like once you're in one, if you're in it for a long time, it makes it almost impossible to get out of. And so I just want to go over a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. I do ask that we hold questions and anything until we open it up the floor for discussions later. But just kind of, if you have any, maybe make a note or remember like if there's anything that pops up, because it might either get answered later in the workshop, or it might be something that you change your mind on, or you might have a different question. So yeah. All right. Okay. So we're going to start by doing my personal story and what I went through in a toxic relationship, and then how that kind of led to over 12 plus years of toxic relationships. So it was like, even when I got out of one, I was in it for 10 years on and off. I actually kept like almost having the same experience with dating. And I didn't understand why. Being a 38-year-old millennial, my generation, we didn't have this information. We didn't talk. We didn't know what gaslighting or ghosting or even, love bombing. Those were not concepts. And we didn't really, when we talked to our friends, it was like, yeah, Dad, he seems like that. You know what I mean? It was never anything like we see today. But then I feel like your generation has all this incredible information and science-backed evidence that's come out, but it's like almost too much. So it's like, what is legitimate? What is credible? What does like the real science say? And not just what we're seeing on TikTok, because they can take little pieces and turn it into, science that's just it's not real, it's false, or it makes you believe, oh, I identify with that. But I want to give you guys something that's a little bit more neutral, and that way you can take in the information and apply it the best you can based on you and the kind of relationships and romance and dating you want to have. So just to start, I wanted to share my personal story because I feel like we either get too much extreme the other side of people saying their experience in toxic relationships, or they don't think anything's wrong or oblivious, or it's the other person's fault, or it's all their fault. So I wanted to go through kind of my journey of it all. And so it started off where I had never dated. I wasn't in a relationship. I was around 20 years old, and I got into a relationship with someone that I had worked with for a year. And he was significantly older than me. He had been married and divorced. So there was kind of this power dynamic that I didn't even think was a thing, but it was. And it was really hard because I knew him before and I knew the way he was. And what I realized was that I wanted him, but didn't necessarily like him. So it's kind of this can kind of commonly happen in love or relationships. So my intensity of the relationship was just on a whole different level. And so I felt like I was crazy all the time, dramatic. And they would make comments like, you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, or little, even more subtle things like, I prefer it when you don't dress this way or when you don't and it started, or no makeup or whatever. And I started over time because it wasn't super aggressive or controlling. For the male gaze, you want to be what your partner wants, but I ended up losing my identity in it. And it took me until I started going to school 5 years ago and started studying psychology to finally figure out like maybe what's going on. And I didn't even consider certain behaviors as toxic or red flags. But those behaviors I just described, when you add them all up, it makes sense. And then now, like attachment styles and love languages and our personal values, all of those things kind of tie into what I did not have or know at all. And so I feel like I got so used to being this anxious with an avoidant type of person, and it created this really, really toxic, unhealthy thing that we both were participating in, but the intentions I don't think on either side were bad. I just think that I would write it off to we're not compatible. But if I would have had the tools like attachment styles, love language, or really truly knowing my personal values is 100% what I did not have throughout my entire 20s. And most of my generation associated values with religion or like spiritual, religious way of looking at things. And that's not what they are. So we're going to kind of go through all of that. And then we're going to have you guys take some like mini quizzes to identify your attachment style and your love language, and then a sheet to take home for your personal values. So yeah, I'm just going to get started on like the science behind kind of like what happened to me. So I always asked the question or didn't regret being in it. I learned a lot and I grew from it, but it was how long I was in it. I was like, why can I not get out of this? And we also worked together. So there was very little like, you had to see each other every day. It's almost impossible to kind of move on and to seek other sources. So we never in those 10 years would go longer than 3 or 4 weeks without getting back together. So there's never an opportunity, even when we didn't together anymore. But it was like, just magnets, but we were so unhealthy. And then we got to a point where we both knew it was unhealthy, but then we accepted it and we kept doing it. And so those boundaries, those personal values kept getting crossed and crossed. And it wasn't until I started going to school where I wanted to understand the chemical dependence on it, which is actually very similar to what addicts experience. It creates this really like your cortisone raises from the stress and anxiety and adrenaline all in there. And then it eventually turns into dopamine, which dopamine is our pleasure and reward system. It's also our focus and motivation. So it's like any addiction is a disease of a dopamine system. So basically the reward system. So even if I was getting good or bad reward, it was fueling it. And it was such a high and such a low that there was never like a healthy level that I couldn't even barely function after we would break up. Like he would be fine. And then by the time I'd finally get myself back together, we'd come back and we just repeat it. And I got so addicted to that chemical dependency of the dopamine to the point where I was reliant on it to just get out of bed and survive. Even though he wasn't healthy for me, that was what was going on internally. And so I want to share, like, that's just huge to kind of understand that this is what happens. But because I did it for so long, I lived in fight or flight and dysregulated my nervous system to the point where now in my 30s, I'm starting to feel the physical effects of it, which is just incredible depression. Even though I'm out of it, I've been out of it for years. I continued to date the same type of person. And when I did meet a healthy person, I was like, this is boring. There's no spark. What is this? Like, no. And then I would go and chase the other thing. And then that didn't make you happy either, but it felt comfortable because it was what I knew. It was all I knew. And so I just wanted to find out, like, it's called shadow work in psychology, where you go kind of back to how did I get like this? What is my part in this? It's very much like self-reflection, self-awareness. And at first, a lot of like, self-blaming and not having like a really good dialogue with myself. It was painful to the point where like I couldn't even be in silence. And so I started having like all these things, and just to physically move my body over time was painful because my fight or flight response was my nervous system was telling my body, no, go back to being in your safe zone and playing dead. It's like almost like, are they gone? Is it there? Can I get up? Nope, nope, nope. And so I would just keep repeating that. And then I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm done. I'm not even going to date. I don't even know what's going on. And it took me a good like 6 months to be like, okay, I'm really not over this. I don't even think I've really ever worked through it, but I need information. That's how I heal, is by learning and understanding internally what's going on, as well as like how and why. And it's not to blame yourself or to think that there's something wrong with you. It's about a way to explore and get curious about yourself and why and how you are, and ways that you can communicate within staying true to your core values. So that's kind of like in a nutshell what I want to do today, and hope that you guys take from this. And really, at no point do I want you guys to feel like there's a right or a wrong or a good or a bad, especially when we're doing the quizzes. Your results are for you to be curious. And there is no better or right or wrong. I just want to make that super clear, because I don't want anyone to walk away feeling like, well, I didn't get the result I wanted. And maybe if you didn't, they constantly change too. And these are mini quizzes. They're not super in depth. So you may not get what you think you are, or maybe do some reflection and be like, maybe I am. Maybe that is something I need to really look into and evaluate. So going deeper, which is, it's actually our conflicting intimacy needs, because we can have different attachment styles and still be compatible and still make it work. But when you have, there's a certain way you have to communicate and set up a relationship when you maybe do have opposite attachment styles, because if you don't, you will run into conflicting intimacy needs. And so what it might look like is everything I went through. A relationship feels like a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. You're constantly nauseated, anxious, like to the point where I was late to everything. I couldn't sleep. I wouldn't eat. I was just poor self-care, because I was constantly breaking up, starting over, getting back together, and it would just start over and over and over. And you literally, it's like, the word like of insanity is, repeating the same behavior but expecting different results. And there's years that I can't remember or that have gone by, because your body and your mind block it out. But then your body does keep the score, and it's like showed up later in life for me. So I just want to really emphasize to take care of yourself and to know yourself to whatever level that may be. You don't have to do like strict, crazy, psycho, like obsessive health, but it's more like, just as you get older, you always hear like sunlight, work out, eat, sleep, but it's more about checking in with yourself too, and your personal values, because that actually will help you align with every decision we make every day is based on our reward and dopamine system. And therefore, when you're more conscious about it, you can actually create when you want it to peak, and when you don't, maybe you want to be more relaxed, you want to be more calm, which is something I never had that tool. Nobody talked about breathing techniques. Like my time when I was your guys, most of your ages, Google wasn't even on your phone. Texting had barely just came out. So, but I also feel like there's a lot of information, and I hope that this somewhat clarifies, like it's deeper than what we're going to talk about or what you're going to do in the quizzes. So you're going to scan the QR code for this first one, and then right after this, we're going to do a worksheet that we're going to pass out, and then I'll go over and explain more in depth what attachment style, love languages are, okay? So we'll give you about 5 minutes to do this one. If you're not finished by then, no rush. I want you to be pretty precise and, like accurate with your choice and your answer. So if you need more time, no problem. Thank you everyone for participating. How do you guys feel? Like what's kind of like, do you feel like it's something you need to process? Do you feel like your results are pretty accurate? Yeah, without knowing anything about either one at this point? Yeah, that's good. Okay, good. I like to know that. Yeah. Ooh. So I'm just gonna go over real quick what attachments, well, more like this video, she's gonna explain a little bit more in depth of the attachment styles. I really like the way she presents it, and she kind of breaks it down, but in a more deep way as well. And then this is a way for you to understand the way you give and receive love, which it can change, because I've taken these over the course of the 5 years since I've been on this journey. And even when I first took these tests, when I first found them, and I took them a month later, I got different results, because I was taking them the first time based on the past and the way I was in relationships, and was like, well, wait a minute, no, I need to do this on who I am now, today, and to see kind of the growth. But there is no like ideal attachment style. Yes, secure, but you're not going to be that with everyone, and not every relationship needs you to be the secure one. Or depending on the person, like for me, I went into this as a securely attached individual. into my relationship. So as you're like listening to her kind of break it down, I want you to think of maybe my example if you don't have one of your own, and to where we were so opposite, and I went in as secure and I came out more anxious and he ended up being more secure. It was like a flip-flop, and we were never at the same page. But what I've learned in psychology is that it's very rare for two attachment styles or even people who kind of share the same love language, whether that's what you need to receive or you give, are the same. So we kind of have a tendency to not go for what we are, even though we all think, well, why can't you read my mind? Why aren't you like this? This is how I would be. This is how I do it. But we often usually do not like subconsciously choose our partners for that reason. So as you're going through all of this, if that is something, some people do, if that is something you feel like, yes, I need that, I need to have that, or maybe this is something I'd like to be challenged on. That way, when you go out into the dating world, you can set your intentions based on knowing your attachment style, your love language, and then your personal values. So, yeah.
If I may, I just want to ask a little bit, because I think we're jumping into attachment styles. And you mentioned what attachment is, but do people in the room have a good sense of what that means, what attachment means? Sort of, so. Yeah, if I could, just a quick
Absolutely,
little
yes.
added information. So, when we're born, as human beings, we're not neurologically predisposed to attach to our caregivers. And as infants, what that means is we turn to our caregivers to have our needs met. Of course, as children and as babies, we have our very basic human needs, right? Of safety, of being fed, of being sheltered, and of being loved. And so we're predisposed to attach to people. We need other people in order to live as human beings. And so as kids, and as we go through our lifespan, children and then adolescents look at our primary caregivers for that attachment need, having those needs met. And then as you move into adulthood, that often switches then to romantic partners. And as adults, we're more capable, of course, of meeting our own personal needs, of shelter, feeding ourselves, etc. But those emotional needs is certainly something we turn towards our romantic partners for. So it moves from that caregiver to our primary partners. And then as Arianna is talking about here, we're going to learn a little bit more about there are different styles of that attachment that often are tied back to what we received as children from our primary caretakers. And some patterns are oftentimes set in childhood in relationship to our primary caregivers and how we were able to get our needs met. That does not mean that that can't change. As Arianna's mentioned, that certainly can develop, and it is really helpful, I think, to understand what your attachment style is now, and if there's things that you want to work on or have it be different from the way you were raised, how you might want to interact and have needs met differently with partners. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And I've just was a more like simplified, but really, I think, great way to describe it. Now, when you go, and we're gonna give you guys all these slides, so you can kind of like look deeper into this based on your attachment style. But just to kind of basically cover what she was talking about, and from my experience, he was avoidant, I was anxious, but I went into it secure, and then we would flip-flop. And a lot of what would happen is this, like the more he would pull back or shut off, the more you would try to smother, you try to give. And it was like this constant like hope, but uncertainty. And hope with uncertainty creates this kind of, euphoric and like intense feeling for me, at least on my side. But he was secure because I came in secure. And then because he knew I was there, he became that, but I never had that certainty. So that's just maybe kind of a thing to look out for when you're getting into relationship dynamics. Now, secure is where you want to be super like emotionally close to someone, and you don't need tons of space, but maybe some alone time. And then avoidance are just more like, I did not realize for the longest time, it took me forever to understand that he sometimes just needed space to be alone because of the way he grew up. He was the only child. His mother worked full time, single mother. It was kind of like I started to realize, oh, has nothing to do with me. Has to do with him and the way he was raised, not just maybe what he needs. But neither one of us knew how to communicate this. So it was like what the earlier video was saying, this constant fighting, this constant battle. And I just expected everyone loves and gives and needs like I do. And then for the longest time, you're almost thinking, well, why can't they be? Or I want to save them. I want to teach them or show them, and then they will. But I've realized over time, you got to kind of radically accept people and see who they really are. And then ask yourself, is this for me? Is there some negotiation? Is like the pros and cons, and kind of go through it in that way. And I encourage you all to kind of, based on everything you find out today, what you can do based on your style, love language to communicate better. We could do a whole nother workshop on that. So, and then love languages is words of affirmation. So that's something like, you look really beautiful, or thank you so much for, cleaning the house. It's like just reaffirm it, like through words, through dialogue. And then there's acts of service. So if you're someone who likes to give gifts, or you like to run errands for your partner, or you like to like show up in little ways, like in my toxic relationship, his was acts of service. And I actually didn't really view them as love or romantic until one day he's like, well, this is my way. Like I should show up and give you breakfast or make you coffee in the morning. Like, and my idea of romance was like flowers and candles and, moonlight. And so it was a moment where I was like, that actually is romantic. That actually is his way of showing love. And it was a way for me to like start changing my perspective about trying to see the way he loved. And then over time, I was like, still, this isn't for me. So even when you do see someone for like the way they're loving, or maybe the way they need, it may not be what you're capable of or your capacity is for. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then there's physical touch, which mine is, it doesn't always mean physical, like, intimacy or in the sexual nature. It's just hold hand, like hand holding, or like a hug, or just, even close to each other's air or space is kind of what I need. I like words of affirmation. I don't need so much. I'm more of a giver with physical touch and acts of service, but I don't need tons of quality time. I just need more a little bit, because I'm also more of an independent. But when you have like two independents, but also an anxious, it's disaster for chaos. Yeah. And then there's, like I said, quality time, which is where it can be whether you are Netflixing and chilling, or you're going out and doing things together, and you need maybe just a little bit more time of that, rather than being like, well, why don't you ever do this? Or why can't we spend more time together? It's all about the tone and the way you present it. So this is why love language is really important. And I think it's when you're first getting into a relationship, whatever type of category that is, casual, short-term, long-term, partnership, or whatever, is to set yourself up and them letting them know, like, you don't want to just come at them and be like, this is my love language, this is my attachment style, and I'm going to figure yours out unless do you know yours? Here's a test. Like, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be too overwhelming. So it's more of just kind of trying on different people to see what you like without compromising your personal values. And then there's people who like to receive gifts. Like, their way of feeling loved is like, if my partner, when we bring me breakfast in the morning, if I'm someone who likes to receive gifts, I would have been like, oh, thank you, but for me, that wasn't a love language. But it was his way of giving. And then when I would try to give him gifts, like I feel like we'd go through all these stages of trying different love languages without even knowing them. And he was not a very physically affectionate person. And that was my main issue and problem in the relationship, because that's how I felt and needed to be loved. And for him, it was, I need my alone time. I need space, and without communicating it. And then basically, as you guys know, we all have different love languages. People often speak different emotional languages. Don't assume your giving style is a receiving style, kind of like what I was saying. And then instead of accusing your partner of failing to recognize their love language, you can invite them to make a decision to show love the way you need and to communicate what they need to feel loved. So it's about just opening the communication and dialogue for that, as early as you can in the relationship without coming on too strong. And then the secret is the I would love formula. So I statements, I feel, or I think. It depends. Like, usually men do better when you say something like I think rather than feelings. Women, we do better when someone says I feel. It's just differences, and not everyone's like that. So it's really truly, I know, like, at times I'm like, this is exhausting, like that I have to sit there and constantly think about I statements and making sure I don't do anything to trigger the other. But if you really care, that's kind of part of trying to make it work, and not to attack, or they're going to get on the defensive. So I just wish I would have had these tools. I'm the type of person where I don't like conflict. I'm a people pleaser. And the more they shut down, the more psycho and crazy and dramatic I would get. And I turned into somebody that I wasn't. And it's like, if I just would have known about I statements, maybe, maybe it would have changed everything. Reflecting on what your personal values are can take time. And values are not necessarily so much who you think you are, it's more about who you want to be. That's what values do for us. They help us make daily decisions to help meet the type of person we want to be. So it's about like decisions, and your actions reflect what your values are. And I had no clue what they are until I got assigned this in my psychology course. And I actually broke down and was like, I don't know what my values are. It took me a really long time to complete the assignment, but it was so healing because it made me realize was the core issue. Was if you don't stand for something and you don't have values, you will fall for everything. And I did, because I didn't have a moral compass guiding me. And the little that I did have, I would ignore and I would suppress and I wouldn't listen to it and I'd overwrite it, to the point where I eventually stopped listening to my body, stopped listening to my emotions, to the point where I was shutting off so much. I was shutting out the positive and the happy and the good. So that's just something for you to take home and to really, really just reflect. And you don't have to do it in one sitting. I always suggest doing this every couple months too, because they'll change. But the goal is to meet somebody who overall similarly aligns with those core values. You can be a different attachment styles. You can be different love languages. If you, like, my parents are dead opposite, and I'm always like, you guys shouldn't work, but they work because their core values are the same and they've stayed the same, and they're still married today, 40 years later. So it's something that I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was something to ask for. Basically, this all leads to dating intentions. Your dating intention, whether it's short-term, casual, partnership, is a way for you to go from being passive to intentional. I was passive, just whatever in your boundaries and your moral, it'll be inflicted. It'll completely crumble if you don't have a more solid foundation. And it's not something you have to know. It's something for you to explore and to figure out, and to not choose values or dating intentions based on what you think you should have or need, but really, really sit with it, and especially in your body. So, but yeah, we're going to open up the floor. Oh, wait. Maybe we'll just skip the last video. But yeah, well, we'll send this out and you guys can go back and watch that last little video. It's really inspiring. It kind of just sums everything up. But yeah, so we'll open up the floor for discussions and questions, and yeah.
So you're saying you're not really, it's not like engaging in conflict now, like the same way, like I don't like conflict in a relationship or arguments. So like, when I try to communicate feelings with people, like some of my past relationships, I feel like disregard or not really listen to. Like also, my last two serious relationships, they weren't very communicative. How do I have a conversation with someone that's not very communicative about their feelings? It's like,
Yeah, I actually took a conflict and resolution course my second semester because I wanted to master this. Because I realized that I wasn't just seeing toxic dynamics in my romantic partners, I was seeing it in friendships, employee work, family. And I was like, I'm just such a people pleaser, I'm such a giver. And I would give, but they didn't ask for it. I would naturally just set that up because that's who I was. And then I tried to figure out why and how I got that way. And I discovered that through my conflict resolution course. I also discovered that it's really about evaluating if the person is emotionally intelligent, even if they're not the best at communicating. It's maybe small doses. It's about the tone you use. It's not necessarily what you say, but it's how you say it that makes all the difference. And the moment when it starts to maybe go the other way, you gotta like just take a beat or a pause and bring it back. So if you're dealing with someone who's more narcissistic or more avoidant or wants to shut down, I want to talk about it, but you're like, I need to solve this right now, maybe give them a space, but set like a limit and then go back later. Yeah. Yes. And make it about you. Saying, my greatest thing that I learned in this class was when people hurt you, I would say, it's not about saying, well, your behavior did this and I'm feeling like this. I would just simply say, do you care about me? Do you want to hurt me? And most people say no. Say, well, this behavior, so I'm my own person, and this is just the way I respond to your behavior, which doesn't, whether you agree with it right or wrong, it hurts me. And that way, it's something in their head. If they continue to try to like make you think that you shouldn't feel that way or whatever, that's a red flag. That's a sign that, wow, you're justifying this behavior and I'm telling you it hurts me. So you're telling me to not feel hurt because you want to so badly continue this behavior. So it's about like making it just more, rational to them. Like, this is why I feel this way, whether you agree or not. It's not about that. It's about, it hurts me. Doesn't matter if you think it's right or wrong. And you're giving them the decision. Yeah.
And I think it'd be helpful to identify the problem first for you and your partner to be able to say, hey, I'm noticing this pattern in our communication. And what are things that we might want to do to improve that? I feel uncomfortable when we talk about feelings. It looks like you might feel uncomfortable as well. How can we kind of lead into that discomfort to be able to talk things through?
And you'll explore different ways of how you can do that.
Some time for other questions, yeah.
Is there a correlation between intent, short-term and long-term, and attachment styles?
Wait, say the question again?
Is there a correlation between intent, dating with long-term, short-term, and attachment styles?
Yeah, so like intent of like what you want for the relationship?
Yeah, like if you're looking into the long-term versus short-term, like are there certain attachment styles that fit into one category versus another? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, I would say that some of the more avoidant type of attachment styles would lend itself to shorter terms. Because there can be often that disruption, that lack of being able to connect. I don't know that there's a correlation, not that I have, no.
I think what you're trying to say is like, if you want short-term, if you want more of like a serious long-term, you would definitely want to know your personal values and your attachment style and your love language. Attachments actually take around 2 years to fully attach as humans. Crazy enough. We think that we just automatically attach. It actually takes 2 years, 2-year mark to fully kind of see that. And then you'll see like people will experience like the honeymoon phase for 2 years and then it just drops because you know someone. There is no uncertainty anymore. You know what I mean? So it's more like just staying in line with that. But if you're more short term, it's about communicating it up front and making it clear to them without seeming like I'm a jerk or I don't care. It's more like just being honest and then invite them to express what they want and what they're looking for. And to maybe seeing if you can meet in the middle or, but it really, stick to what you're looking for.
Yeah, I love that slide that was mentioned about the clarity in the beginning. If both people are on the same page, like, hey, I'm not really looking for a long term, I'm interested more in just a short term, let's go and have fun. But if there's clarity on that, I think that can lead to a good time, a fun time and a good understanding. But if one person has a different intention of wanting this to be more long term, I think that's an important thing to talk about.
And I'll include in the slides another slide that I have that kind of breaks down how to communicate these sorts of things based on your attachment style, love language, and personal values that can be a roadmap for you to kind of explore. And also, I invite you to just, even in your daily lives, any relationship, interpersonal relationships you have, try to see if you can start maybe identifying people's attachment style or love language without having to be like, oh, here's a quiz, take it, or maybe you should look into this. It's helped me phenomenally be able to kind of like identify it in people now, because it helps me better communicate what I need, but also better give people what they need without being like, let's have this discussion. Yeah.
I guess, so is the goal, whether it's long-term or short-term, to be attached, like mutually or in harmony with each other? Because I would think logically, if both were the same, long-term would seem like better, just because it's more permanent.
Well, and short-term can have its benefits. It can help you explore, it can help you what's right or wrong, or maybe you're not ready for a fully secure person. Maybe you need something else. Maybe, you know what I mean? It's about exploring what's right for you. But even if you're having a casual relationship, one thing that when I tried casually dating, not knowing my personal values, I crossed a lot of things and did things that I never would have done if that didn't feel good in the body and I didn't know why. And your stomach drops and you physically have a reaction. And I continued that because then you build up this shame and you can continue down this road. And it's that there's choices that you make that are not aligned with really your super core values, even when it's casual. And if you don't know what they are, you can cross that line and then have a lot of shame and self, blaming and depression and hating yourself. So it's about no matter what, just staying in line with your values, even if it's casual or whatever. It doesn't make no one's right or wrong with whatever type of relationship they want, but it's about making sure that you do not make choices and decisions that are really going to hurt you in the end, and you're going to maybe go down a path that completely you abandon them. It's a moral compass. It's a map. It's a way to keep you like stability and just, consistent, but also explore and have fun. And yeah, truly, I mean, it's a journey. It truly is a journey. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Anyone else? No.
Anything else, or any reflections on what you might have learned about yourself in doing these presents or second style?
Well, like,
No,
the attachment stuff,
questions?
I think it just varies for me depending on the relationship, because what the one I just did is like, I'm more preoccupied time, but I realized that also some relationships, there's somewhere I felt more secure in my desires, and I'm like, yeah, well, this is like, I think how I feel right now about relationships, like if I were in one, this is probably like how I would feel. I'm not gonna how I feel, but there's times where I felt secure, and then there's times where I definitely felt anxious. Definitely not avoiding, like, I like to talk about stuff in relationships, so it's like.
I love that. I will serve you well.
I like you, I don't think there's like, if something's wrong, I wanna fix it, something
Right.
fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is also a problem, I guess, too, it's like,
Well, it can lead to this pattern of like, what we call the pursuer and the withdrawer. So the person who gets anxious when there's conflict wants to get it resolved right then and there. Because it's anxiety producing, right, to be in conflict. And sometimes if you have a partner who's a withdrawer, they might be overwhelmed and dysregulated by their emotions and their thoughts, and they actually need a little break to regulate, like, be able to even to tell you what's going on. But that withdrawer causes anxiety in the pursuer, and so the pursuer pursues and the withdrawer withdraws even further. And it becomes this difficult dynamic.
I have noticed that, like, when very quick, it's like, there's no breaking come back to it, it's like, it does work better.
We're not coming from a place of a high emotion. You're coming from a more rational, like honest place. Like that's why I started taking a beat. Like when I would feel something, I wouldn't respond, but I wouldn't also suppress it. I would sit with it maybe for a day or two and then present it when I wasn't high, or like would make sure, like I'd even make a notes in my phone. Hey, this is how you felt. Make sure that you circle back so that I wasn't like just bottling and not suppressing, because it'll create exploding. And then you say and do things that you can't take back. Like I was so incredibly vicious when I would blow up verbally that I would get sick like weeks afterwards because it was so not in line with my core values. So my body physically was like, this isn't okay. Yeah.
One relationship on, and like, we took a break for a while, and because we were constantly like arguing, and she like did some self-reflection, came back and said, I realized that I'm constantly looking for reasons to argue, but like, I can't remember the reason for it, but she claimed that she's like constantly looking for reasons to argue with me and stuff. I think because she's, wanting to be person or something, there was like a reason, and I was like, oh, like, well, that makes sense, why we're
Well, and it sounds like she's more like avoidant, a little bit more